Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to America's Some Assembly Required. Anna Maria and I will be talking about the how-tos of building and operating our American state assemblies and committees. We do have a schedule of topics that we will be working through. We have moderators in the chat, and we will only take questions on the topic of the day. So, and as we go along, week after week, we hope to address and answer your questions on building your state assembly. Today, we're going to start into the Jural Assembly. So please stick to the topics and let's assemble. So I'm going to bring Anna onto the stage here. So here we go. Hi, Anna.
Hi, Lisa. I see you're not in your usual environs.
No, we're actually in Tennessee for the holidays, and I'm broadcasting from the closet.
Are you visiting kids or family, or?
We're visiting Doug's 88-year-old mother, and and all of his brothers or sisters are all coming in and congregating here in Tennessee from all over the country. So
wonderful.
Yeah. So I'll be busy tomorrow starting to get some of the fixings together, and just like everybody else. So
yeah, well, I've got Shannon out collecting my turkey for me today, and I've got my cranberry pickers picking, and
there you go.
Hopefully,
on our way here, we are blessed in Southern Ohio to have turkey farms, and so we stopped yesterday and bought a smoked turkey. And it's amazing. It's really, everybody prefers that. In fact, they didn't even want regular turkey this year; they wanted smoked turkey. So that's what we do. We pick up the turkey and provide the turkey, and I'll do a little cooking and things tomorrow, but that's it. So I have a very favorite yellow squash recipe called, you can look it up on the internet, called Aunt Fanny's squash.
Aunt Fanny's?
Aunt Fanny's squash casserole. And I'll be making that tomorrow. And that was the big request from everybody. So it's an original recipe from Georgia, and my mother picked it up in the early 1970s, and it was a family favorite of ours, and it's become a family favorite of Doug's family.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's one of the great traditions of families in America, is all the different recipes that get handed down from hand to hand and place to place. It's really quite amazing how that ties us all together. One of the things that modern America has lost track of is the fact that Thanksgiving is a potluck.
Yes, very much so.
And we burden ourselves unduly when we feel that we have to do it all ourselves. It wasn't ever meant to be just one family with one turkey and one woman burdened down with making all these different favorite dishes for everybody. It was meant to be an entire kind of community event and an entire group of people getting together for a potluck. And yet, that when I was a young career wife and I was doing all these things, right? I'd work all week long and have to do all the background planning myself. And then on Thanksgiving Day, I'd have a day off from work, and I'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and put the turkey in the oven, and I would work like a dog all day. And 11 o'clock at night, I'd be finishing up scrubbing the roasting pan, and then I'd be facing going back to work the next day.
Yes.
And it was exhausting.
Yes.
It was mentally, emotionally, and physically exhausting simply to put together a Thanksgiving dinner for everybody.
Yes.
But I was the the wife of the oldest son type thing, where it all devolves on you, because The older generation is too old to bear the stress and the expense, and the younger generation is depending on you. So here you are. One year I just said, look, we're going to turn this into a potluck. You know, Betty, you bring the mashed potatoes. Susie, you bring the salad. You know, Joe, you bring the wine. And I just apportioned it all out to different people to participate and do something toward it. And that worked like a charm. That worked beautifully. And it was actually a pleasure to have Thanksgiving again.
Yes.
But I think people need to open themselves up to that concept. And it sounds like your family is no problem with it and already well on the way.
Oh, yeah. Well, we have, of course, Doug's two sisters here. One is coming in from Illinois, but she cooks. Both sisters cook. I was able to teach them to cook when they were teenagers, and because they're that much younger than us, and they both cook. One of the sisters of the sister-in-laws she can cook, and she likes to cook, and so we just kind of all divide between two kitchens next door to each other and go at it. So it's quite an event by the time we're done. So
And it's fun.
yes.
And it's communal. And everybody's busy, everybody's chirping around, talking, having a good time. Everybody's looking forward to the feast. The feast itself is lovely. And that's the way it's meant to be.
That's right. That's right. And I have one sister-in-law who loves to do dishes and really doesn't like to cook. So she does all the dishes. I can cook all day long. I got somebody to do all the dishes.
Oh, yeah. If you got enough people, you can even put someone on decorations. You can have somebody doing some other aspect of this. Oh, you're in charge of the lighting the candles, little one. You're 10 years old. Here's the lighter. You light the candles. Really, truly, there's something for everybody to do at Thanksgiving, and we all have something to be thankful for.
Yes, we do. We do. And I also am going to mention that you and I did not coordinate our buffalo checks today. This was a complete accident. So on the same way.
I was thinking how nice you look, actually. And I was thinking about your nice thin shoulders, and I was thinking that I look like a linebacker with a pinhead. But that's the way it is.
I would not say my shoulders are nice and thin. I just proportionally look okay. So it's no.
I look like a professional football player.
I do too. Anna, by the time I was 13, because of all of the athletic activity, I could bench press 125 to 130 pounds as a 13-year-old girl.
Remind me not to pick any fights with you.
That's what everybody on the assembly says. So, yeah, no. So when it comes to linebacker shoulders, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think mine was partially just inherited. That my father had really, he was well built for a man. He had long sloping shoulders, and yeah. So
well, today we're going to start working on Jural Assembly. I know this is a topic everybody is really interested in getting into. Many of the assemblies out there are still kind of searching around, trying to figure out how to do this whole court system thing. And so that's what we're going to dive into starting today, and then carry through until we've exhausted the subject, right?
Okay.
So, all right. So I'm going to go and I want to remind everybody, and this has come up question in the past is, oh, Lisa, did you change the structure of the assemblies because it's not 4 pillars? And the answer is no, right? We have a general assembly and we have 3 sub-assemblies.
Right.
And this graphic more or less demonstrates that, that the other assemblies are sub-assemblies, and that the general assembly is the one that really approves it all, because it is all the people on your state. Right?
Right. The general, if you want to think about it in terms of sets and subsets, the General Assembly is the big group, the big the big set of all people that are part of your assembly. And then the Jural Assembly, the Militia Assembly, and the International Business Assembly represent subsets, because not everybody who's in the General Assembly is in the Jural Assembly. Not everyone who's in the General Assembly is in the militia. And not everyone who's in the General Assembly is in the International Business Assembly. But all the people on the sub-assemblies are members of the General Assembly.
Right. So this kind of unifies the structure of everything. And, it makes sure that as we go through these, the Jural Assembly and eventually the militia and the international business, that everything goes up to the people. The people are the ones that have the final approval of everything that we do, even on the lower assemblies, on the sub assemblies, because it's presented to everyone.
Right. Yep. And so the Jural Assembly, everybody in the General Assembly is potentially a juror. Okay? But not everybody winds up being a juror, either because their name wasn't drawn or because, for some reason, they can't be a juror right now. Okay? And there are very practical, obvious, good reasons why some people do not, cannot, or whatever, cannot be part of the jury pool at a given time. I mean, for example, if your cousin is the subject of an investigation and court case,
right?
Conflict of interest would disqualify you from serving as a juror in that case. What if you're a mom with 10 kids under the age of 16? You can't serve as a juror.
No.
You just can't. You don't have the energy, you don't have the free time, you don't have anybody to take care of your kids. Life happens, right?
Right.
Okay, so you're exempt from jury pool duty.
Right. Sometimes it's about, you're going to be on vacation, or you've already got a vacation scheduled, or you've got business that you're either running or conducting that doesn't allow you the time to be a juror. The hope is that eventually you'll do your duty, because that's the duty we sign up to when we become assembly members. But that eventually you will do that duty, but maybe it's not right now. Right.
Other typical reasons why you might not be a jury pool member or be a juror in a particular case would be you had an accident and broke your leg. Mm-hmm. So you're in a full leg cast for the next 2 months, and that's all there is to it.
Right.
Or say that you've had a complete mental and emotional breakdown, and you've been hospitalized, and you don't feel like you're emotionally and mentally stable enough to deal with anything like this. Okay, well, everybody needs a vacation. What if you're too elderly? What if you're 90 years old and you have mobility issues and you don't feel like you can keep up with all the Sturm und Drang that goes on in a court case and keep all the facts straight, and so you don't want to be a juror? Well, that's a perfectly good reason not to be a juror. All right? At a certain point, we all deserve a retirement. Okay? Right. And it's no reflection on us. So there are all sorts of reasons why someone who's a member of the General Assembly might not be in the jury pool, either temporarily or permanently. But if we can, we have a duty to serve as a juror. And the reason it's a duty is that without our courts, we do not have our law. All right.
Right.
And, people often misunderstand jurisdiction, and they misunderstand the court venue. And, this is one of the things I need to discuss with some of the other patriot groups who don't understand it either. And this is the meat and guts of the fact is that our courts have the venue and the jurisdiction over the physical world. Our courts are the ones that actually can speak to both the facts and the law and judge both. Our courts, the people courts, are the ones that have jurisdiction over all things that are substantive and physical. So, land is our jurisdiction. Money, actual physical money, gold and silver, that's our jurisdiction. Physical people, living people, that's our jurisdiction. Living animals, our jurisdiction. Trees, water, mountains, minerals, lakes, fish, that's our jurisdiction. Anything that's physical and substantial is a land or soil asset. And that includes surface water and groundwater. Okay, they're physical. So all the physical things that you can think of are in our court's venue. And people sometimes think that we are limited only to land and only to soil issues. But no, there's American Admiralty too. So
right. That's how we can govern our lakes and our resources that way as well, that we fish on, that we, pleasure boat on, that we do all these things on.
Right. Well, there's kind of a split jurisdiction and some issues in some areas, but those are kind of arcane. Those are more specialized issues. You have to become aware of the exceptions to the rule, but in general, our courts are in charge of everything, and it is a matter of learning some specific federal exemptions where they have control of some aspect, such as the agreement we have with the British government that the king is the trustee on the high seas and navigable inland waterways. Okay? We know that that's part of what we inherited as part of our system. That doesn't mean that there isn't American Admiralty that is completely viable. We have Admiralty jurisdiction too. We didn't give it all away. All right? So we have to learn our Admiralty jurisdiction and enforce our Admiralty law too. But actually, day to day, what we're going to be dealing with in most states of the Union is going to be limited to actual physical land and soil assets. And we're going to be making our decisions about those sorts of things. And, other kinds of material interests like, who owns a swordfish caught off the coast of California? Some of us will have more Admiralty issues than others, but generally speaking, our courts have jurisdiction over anything that's physical.
Right. And so just to kind of refresh everybody's idea that the word law is actually an acronym for land, air, and water, the three jurisdictions of law.
Right.
And so the land law refers to everything land and soil, physical assets, people, just everything that is in the physical world. The air jurisdiction refers to like trust law and ecclesiastical law and canon law. So those types of areas. Go ahead.
Air is the realm of ideas and energy. So air is where you find corporations. Air is where you find patents, trademarks, copyrights, labor contracts, performance contracts, uh, uh, residuals from copyrights, and all sorts of other things that are intellectual or energetic assets. Your labor is found in law. In the law of labor is actually an air jurisdiction thing when it comes to labor contracts and taxes on labor and things of that nature.
Okay. And then water refers to maritime. And I always tell everybody the easiest way to remember that one is it developed from the law of pirate law, basically the law of the trade routes from um, uh, trading over in the actual transportation of goods from India through up and over the Horn of Africa and into England. That it was developed from basically that law of pirates.
Right. The law of the sea is mutable. It is a law in which all of the participants in it are dead, legally dead, fictions. Okay. So they're all persons. They're not operating as people on the sea. And part of that is that we don't belong to the sea. We don't belong to the sea jurisdiction. We don't naturally live in the sea. And so we are, so far as the sea is concerned, we're foreign to it.
Right.
And so we're in this queer kind of status of being alive but dead when we're on the sea. And this gives rise to all sorts of kind of constructive traditions in the law of the sea that we don't have on the law of the land, because we're dealing with actual factual, here's this coffee cup and here's this computer mouse. They're on a collision course. Boom. Okay. We're dealing with actual factual things and actual factual processes and circumstances that we can observe and evaluate. But on the sea, that's not necessarily true. On the sea, everything is a matter of illusion and appearance and surfaces. You know, can you see below the surface of the water? Usually not. Okay, so the sea is a place of secrets and appearances and illusions and uncertainties and fictions. And this law of the sea is similar in that it is deceptive. It has its own language, its own jargon. It's easy to mistake a living man as a legal fiction person. And, you know, there are things involved in these different forms of law that are hard to grasp until you see the history of the whole thing and realize that it is all based on these, the nature of the grounding of the system, whether it's land law or air law or sea law. But the important thing for us as neophytes is that land law is all about the physical. It's all about what's actual and real. And that is our natural jurisdiction. That's where we have our lives. This is where we breathe. This is where we live, is on the land and soil. So it should be natural to us to deal with things in that way. Our language is just plain proper English. It is not legalese. So, you know, our language is what it says it is. It's what the language is intended and what it means in a dictionary sense and in a contextual sense that is simple. We don't use code words, for example, in American common law. We don't say person and mean corporation. We don't say state and mean a state of state business. We don't have legal terms, okay, for land law, it is what it is, and it means what it means. Now, we may have to go back and check the meaning of a word in 1906 as opposed to the meaning of the same word now. But we're not looking at this in terms of Congress just arbitrarily saying, oh, well, we're now going to change the meaning of the word vaccine to mean something totally different.
Right.
Okay.
So our courts are living courts, essentially.
Yes,
and we deal with living people.
And actual factual things and events. We're not talking about theoretical things. We don't talk in our courts about thought crimes. We have no such thing as a thought crime. Period.
Correct.
Does not exist.
Harm or no harm. There's
Right.
your two standards. Is there harm involved or is there no harm involved?
Right.
Period.
And we don't get into a lot of suppositions and legal theories. Okay. Our law is law. It's lawful. And so it deals with facts and it deals with actual factual evidence and it deals with reality. It deals with our real world as we live and breathe. So if you have to determine who has jurisdiction, ask yourself first and foremost, well, is this something actual and factual? Are we dealing with living men and women who are on the land? Or are we dealing with persons, living men and women acting as persons on the sea? Are we dealing with, an actual event involving actual cars? Or are we dealing with vehicles?
Right.
No.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So one thing that's very helpful, I think, to people begin to grasp all this is that we have established standards and we can apply those standards to be sure that we're on solid ground. Okay, as discussed, our law language is proper English. So if we're spelling things as they should be spelled in proper English, and we are using style conventions and grammar that are proper for proper English, then we're doing it right. Our official language, period, at all, ever, is just plain old standard proper English. It doesn't include things
We don't
like
have standard manuals this thick, do we?
no, and we don't have things like parsed syntax. We don't use all capital letters to denote corporations. We write it out, the ABC Incorporated, whatever it is, we just use plain old proper English. We don't use legalese. We don't have legal terms of art. We don't have special jargon that it has sort of like secret meetings, anything like that. We don't have. I gave you the example of person. Well, in proper English, a person can be any individual man or woman. It does not carry the meaning of necessarily meaning a corporation. But in federal law, which is international sea law, they can use the word person to mean corporation, simply because Congress declared that person meant corporation for federal purposes. You see? So we don't have any trick words like that. We just have plain old English in our courts.
Right.
And what you say is what you say, and what you mean is what you mean.
We always go back and check Bouvier's 1856 dictionary or below, or earlier than that, if we really got a question about whether we want to use a word or not. And you have to be really careful when you're out there searching because they've done updates and revisions to it since then, and incorporated that in. The only one that I found that really sticks somewhat true is one on supremelaw.org, which is the Supreme Court Library, and PDF of Bouvier's 1856. So, that's a great resource out there to people if they wish to go look that up and can get that as a download for PDF. So,
Right, absolutely. So we have our own dictionary. Land law has Bouvier's dictionary. This was the dictionary that was adopted by our Congress for land law. Now, you constantly hear about Black's Law, Black's Dictionary, Black's. Well,
20th edition, right?
yeah, right. Well, even the editors and promoters and publishers of Black's Law Dictionary have admitted in public that it's a spoof, and that it was developed for the jurisdiction of the sea. Okay, so the sea jurisdiction has its dictionary, which is Black's Law Dictionary. Okay, and that's what the sea jurisdiction uses as a dictionary.
Correct. And they've changed many of the definitions to suit their narrative throughout their process of usurping our governments and our courts.
Yeah. Well, let's just look at something. Where do these systems of law come from? Well, they come from Scripture. And so each system of law also has its own Bible. Our Bible is the Geneva Bible. So if you want to find the meaning of a word and you don't have a dictionary, you can refer to its meanings in the Bible that is attached to your form of law. So we have the Geneva Bible, we have the Bouvier's dictionary, right?
Yes.
And the sea jurisdiction has the King James version of the Bible and the Black's Law dictionary.
Right.
So if you're looking at either one of those two forms of law, you have your reference books, right? Now you know that land has a separate set of reference books from the sea. The King James Bible was ordered to be created by King James I of England at, I think, 1601. And we don't know this, we're never taught this in America, but King James I was a flaming homosexual, and he wanted the Bible tweaked to make it more friendly toward the abuse of government power.
That's right.
And more than 20,000 changes were made to the King James Version of the Bible to promote that end result.
Right.
So
right.
They have a different Bible, and they have a different dictionary, and they have a different law, which boils down to admiralty law and code.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
right.
We don't have code.
No.
And so that they have their different reference books, and that results in different findings or different conclusions because they use different reference books. In the jurisdiction of the air, similarly, they have their own reference books, and their reference books are not all that, they're not things that Joe Average has access to.
That's
so that
right.
makes it even more arcane.
Yeah, they no longer allow just anyone to walk into the library, the law libraries. A lot of times you either have to be a student in a law class, or you have to show your bar card to get into the law libraries, at least here in our area. So they're very funny about that. And there's certain sections, unless you've got a bar card, you can't get into at all.
Which is wrong. That's against the law.
Yeah.
It's against our law. We have to have public law. And see, they're making it into private law.
Mm-hmm. More evidence.
And so that's part of what we have to address, and that's part of what we have to enforce against them, because they've set up their own little private law and their own little private law society, and they're trying to claim that everybody is part of their law society and under their thumb, and that we don't even have the right to know what the law is, and we don't have the ability to interpret law, and blah, 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 and this is all just bogus bullshit.
Right.
Okay, so the attorneys among us are trying to carve out a very large territory and authority for themselves, which they do not have and which they must not be given.
Right.
Anyway, if you go to ecclesiastical law, then you're going to be looking at the Latin Vulgate as your Bible. And your dictionary is also going to be provided by the Latin Vulgate and the meaning of Latin words, because they use a Roman system of law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they use Roman civil law and have never changed. They've used Roman civil law for centuries, and that's just the way it is in the jurisdiction of the air. So
Correct.
if you're not conversant in Latin, get conversant.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I'm going to drag us back to the diagram that I have that I put up, the pillar for Jural Assembly. And, I always point out that in the pillars that the people are always listed, with the exception of one pillar, the people are always listed at the top of the pillar. So the jury pool is basically representing the people, presenting the people,
Mm-hmm.
and our common law as common to all people, to all assets, right? And it's
Right.
and it's at the very top. I know you always say it's a bottom up structure, but in our pillars, in a way, it's represented as the people are the ones that make the decision. They're the top and all the way down. So
Well,
everyone falls underneath them.
I think it's important that people realize that the jurisdiction of land and soil is the realm of the living man and the living woman, and it's understood to be the common man. Okay? This is not the realm of sovereigns and kings and princes. It's the realm that belongs to the common people in the sense of the rest of us. Okay? The Romans called it the jus soli, the men of the soil. All right? So when we're talking about common law, we're talking about common men. We're not talking about persons, officials, princes, potentates, and poobahs. We're talking about the realm of me and you and the farmers and the laborers and the carpenters and the people that are just living their lives, that are not holding public offices. Okay.
Right.
And such public offices as we do occupy, say as jurors, are simple public offices that anybody can fulfill and that have very simple requirements. So, when you serve as a juror in an American common law court, you're being called upon to act as a rational and honest person, and that's really all that's required. You don't have to have a law degree. You don't have to have a whole fancy lot of knowledge of jargon of any kind. But you do need to function as a person without a conflict of interest in the case. You need to function honestly, not duplicitously, not speaking with a forked tongue when you ask questions. You do need to bring forward your best self in terms of having integrity and using your best skills of being able to discern truth and to ferret out the facts. You're sort of, all of a sudden you're supposed to be a little bit of Joe Colombo here, all right? And
exactly. There's a lot of people that don't understand, when you're a juror, you have to bring that desire for justice, not a vengeance for justice, but a desire for justice to get to what is true. You have to use common sense, right? And you have to bring that questioning spirit. So many of us have been indoctrinated to just sit back and be quiet little mice
be fed.
and just listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not our role as jurors. Our role as jurors, when you're on a jury, you're essentially not only listening, but you're asking questions like you're the prosecutor. So you have to kind of ferret the details, maybe not the prosecutor. I'll take it back to being a principal, right? I got 2 kids in my office. They're both telling me tales. I have to decide based on the facts that I know and the tales that I'm hearing and the questions that I ask as maybe who was right and who was wrong, or maybe that they were both wrong, and what to do about that in terms of the whole process, right?
Right. You have logic, you have evidence, facts and evidence, I should say, and then you have discernment. And discernment isn't so easily pigeonholed, but it's the fruit of your lifetime experience and of your evaluation of the facts and evidence and your logical, rational evaluation process. So you've got facts and evidence, logic, and discernment, and they all play a role in ultimately deciding what you think about an issue.
Right. And I always lead our discussions when we're having them about jury training to lead them back to say, you got to go back to the who, what, when, where, how, and why of the situation. And if you can't get those questions answered, you need to keep drilling down to find out where that is, because that's going to be important in the discernment of where you're going with your final judgment, because our judgments are final.
Right. Once one of our juries has spoken to something, it's the end of it. We don't go back and have endless appeals. The only way that you get an appeal in our system is if new facts and evidence arise.
Right. That's exactly right.
You don't get routine retrials to argue about some impression that may have been made or not. You only get a new trial when there's new facts and evidence to be considered, added into the pile, so to speak, of evidence and facts and arguments that have gone before.
So we talk about jury pool. Let's talk about who can be on the jury pool. So in the past, we've talked about, yes, any ASN can be on a jury pool.
Mm-hmm.
Any citizen can be on the jury pool as long as it doesn't present a conflict of interest with their position, right?
Right.
But especially our American state citizens and our citizen eligibles can be on certain juries. They can only be on certain juries. Like if we're trying a state official in our court, then that needs to be tried by citizens. Is that correct?
Our citizens have a special role in that they try international issues, whereas our ASNs are meant to try in-state domestic issues.
Great dividing line. Good way to put it.
And so
go ahead.
Well, I'm just bringing forward the fact that we have both county and state courts, and they're separate court systems that operate in separate jurisdictions. Mm-hmm. In our system, the counties are the ones that have the soil law or local law, okay, and the states are the ones that deal with international business and affairs, and the state as a whole operating.
Mhm. Right. Right. So, the county is gonna deal with county issues,
Right,
right? And if it takes place between two counties, then that goes to the state.
right,
Yes. Yes.
and,
Okay.
right. And the state in our system, and a lot of this system has been assaulted and misrepresented and screwed with by the federal government in the past 40, 50 years.
District courts.
Yeah, well, for example, the issue of abortion.
Hmm.
Abortion is a state issue. It's not a federal issue, never was. There's no aspect of health granted to any federal institution. There isn't even a mention of health in any federal constitution. So health is an issue outside the purview of any federal institution, including any federal court. And they just recently came out and admitted that. And they tossed everything back to the states and said, hey, this is a state issue. The states have to deal with it. So each state is responsible. It's not just, it's a duty and a responsibility, but also a right to determine issues of that kind of what's allowable within the borders of your state or not. So if your state as a whole decides that for certain, okay, you could in theory your state could decide that, okay, well, it's a free-for-all here, and abortion is legal in New Jersey, for example, and you can just have an abortion on demand. Boom, that's the law in New Jersey. Well, then Philadelphia and the people in Pennsylvania get together and they scratch their heads and say, well, we're not overall, we don't want abortion on demand to be legalized here in our state. But in cases of incest or rape, we'll allow it. Every state is now forced with making those choices because the federal government has thrown up its hands and saying, we don't have jurisdiction over this.
Right.
And they
It's
never
called
did.
rights. Right.
Okay. They don't have any kind of mandate or permission to make dictates about vaccines either, except to their own employees.
Hmm. Correct. Correct.
So, there's a lot of things that have gotten out of hand through the federal government overreaching and overstepping.
Hmm.
If you look back at it with an eye for our history and our actual law and our Constitution and the limitations of the constitutions upon federal entities, you realize very readily that Jimmy Carter was way out of line establishing a federal Department of Education.
Absolutely. Because it takes over the state's rights, and especially the county local jurisdiction over their education. And
Right,
that was determined at the local level always.
right,
Always.
right. They also don't really have any right to push segregation. Of course, they did.
Yeah.
But this is another example where, for better or for worse, the federal government overstepped its limitations, its constitutional limitations, and now the pendulum is swinging back as more and more people have become aware, and more of the jurists involved have become aware of the fact that they're liable for this.
Right. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so we have a contract with our federal subcontractors, which is pretty much spelled out in the constitutions themselves. There are a few treaty agreements that we may or may not be aware of, that we need to become aware of. But other than that, those constitutions are meant to limit the federal government and to very specifically empower the federal government to do the delegated duties.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So with our jury pools and as we look at those jury pools, right now we're all in the assembly phase. So we are assembling our state courts first.
Right.
That gives us the structure and the overall umbrella that we can normalize our courts within our states from the state level to the county level. Normally, we would have built that from the bottom up, but because it was undone that way, we have to reestablish it in the same direction. So our state courts get formed first, and that means our state jury pools, we have to look at that along the way and elect those or get people to volunteer to be on our initial jury pools from all of our population on our states.
Right.
So when we talk about jury pools, and I know that this was something that was, I believe, originally in our Jural Assembly handbooks, was that basically jury pools are 6-month terms, and those terms you can't have more than 2 terms in 24 months. So in 2 years, you could serve 2 6-month terms. And then you're alternating between all the various levels of court that we're going to eventually get into. So everything from being an arbitrator in the arbitration or, an independent review committee type phase of our Jural Assembly, through our living court, through our jural, or through our grand jury, and through our petit juries. So you're going to be rotating through all of these things, which is why we need a big pool.
Yeah, well, and really, we don't use petit juries.
Okay.
We have trial juries.
Right.
That's our proper word.
Our proper
petit
word.
Juries are often juries of only 6 people that are used in admiralty courts, but we use trial courts. So we have trial courts and grand juries. Okay, so we have trial juries and we have grand juries, and we may have a pool of arbitration services. We may offer arbitration services, but that's a private function. Okay, that's an agreement reconciliation device that people can choose to try to get a resolution short of going to court. Okay, court is the court of last resort. Okay, the court is the last resort. We don't want to be. No, we don't want to be in court. Court is what we go to when we have no other options, and we're expected to try to resolve our problems before we ever get to court. So if we have an argument with our neighbor, we have an obligation to try to resolve that before going to court. Americans traditionally are not a very litigation-prone people. We tend to establish reasonable codes of conduct for ourselves, an individual moral standard, and to live by it. You've heard such things as "my word is my bond." Okay, that's an American concept. Keeping your word, being honest in your contracts, doing what you say you will do. Those are the kinds of hallmarks of self-governance, and that's the American way. And if you don't keep your word, if you don't perform your contracts, and you don't have some really compelling, reasonable excuse for not doing so, well, you're going to get lambasted in an American court. because the American court and the American common law, which is based on the common sense and discernment of the common people, okay, tends to lambaste you if you're being an ass.
Yes, exactly. I've always said that well, somebody will say, well, well, what if I can't agree? And I said, well, then you're not going to like going into our courts because it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be a dose of cold water and sometimes a paddle involved with it, so to speak. So, it is, we are called to really try to settle our issues as much as we can, between ourselves and, in an arbitration, maybe in an arbitration phase, settlement, because you're not going to like somebody else deciding the outcome.
Right. Well, and if I may, you can look at this in a lot of different ways, but there are some ways I found to be helpful. The law that we are used to, that is most familiar to us, is a form of British law that is a bastardization of English common law combined with admiralty law. It's neither fin nor fur. Okay, it's a mishmash that was created to benefit the government. And so you can look at it as politicians' law. And of course, politicians are well known for being schmarmy and greasy and payola driven and dishonest and, basically not men of honor. Okay. So the law that they promote is also greasy and given to dishonor and given to dishonest practices, and to be forgiving to criminals and to be malleable and flexible, and to be rooted in the judge's discretion rather than the jury's decision. That's their law. And so I give the example of a guy goes out and he gets drunk, and on his way home, there's a teenager pedaling their bicycle home from a cheerleading meet at the high school, and the drunk guy just rams into this teenager on the bicycle, and she goes flying 300 feet and is killed.
Right.
Okay. In their court, it's considered aggravated manslaughter. It's aggravated by the fact that the guy was roaring drunk when he did it. Mm-hmm. And it's manslaughter because he didn't really intend to kill anybody. He just did. Okay. We consider it first-degree murder because the guy knew he was drunk when he got in the car.
Right.
So it was premeditated that he was doing something reckless and likely to cause bodily damage, right?
Right.
And he took her life.
Right.
So,
right.
And that's what I mean. That's an example. It's the difference between getting off with 2 years of jail and a fine and having to go to rehab and having your license revoked for a year versus being dead.
Right.
And
that's
so
exactly right.
Our law is very strict. Our law is very draconian. Mm-hmm. I give another example. People are familiar with the Lonesome Dove series. Most millions of Americans watched Lonesome Dove on TV when it was a miniseries. Okay, well, there's a famous situation there where one of the characters, who's actually a friend of the main group of characters, gets involved with riding with a group of outlaws. And although he doesn't kill anybody and he doesn't steal any horses or cows, he's with a group of people that do. And so he gets hung because he was an accomplice by being with that group of outlaws. Okay, so there's this famous scene where Jake Spoon is their friend, and they're having to hang their friend because he was part of this group.
Right. Right. Exactly. Well, Anna, we've got a lot of questions out there that are kind of general that we're going to be getting into here as we move a little bit further in. And I think it's really important that we're establishing so much of the basis and so of what our law is, what our courts are, how our jury pools are going to be, moving forward.
Yeah.
And then, as we move through, we're gonna attack some of these questions that are out there because they're a little bit further down the concepts.
Yeah.
And and we'll get into that. So Leanne, save your questions. We'll be putting them back up again. We'll be addressing those as we go through because we want to get the foundations and the structure of our jural assemblies first, and then the court operations wrapped around those jural assemblies as we move forward. So, the one question that I do see here that we've kind of sort of answered is, does the state jural assembly need to be standing or seated before a county jural assembly can function?
No.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
It's probably a good idea because you don't want to enact processes that are not that are outside of where you need to be with your state jural assembly as well.
Well, the thing is that we haven't begun an organized training for the counties. Okay. And the county jurisdiction is different. So, if you were to put together a county jural assembly and you had enough people on your county, it would be difficult for you, if not impossible, to hold a general court. Now, you could possibly do an action that had validity in law that was just addressing one particular case or one particular issue before you get the training that you need to actually carry it off generally. You do have to obey federal law in federal context. You do have to obey state law in state context. And I think there's a misunderstanding when people think that the county has the ultimate responsibility within the borders of the county, so the county can do anything it wants. That is true in a sense, but it's not true in other ways. And you have to learn where those boundaries are and what those obligations are within the greater framework of the system. So yes, you could bring together a county grand jury. You could bring together a county trial jury. You could have a justice of the peace presiding over the proceedings, and it could be very beneficial if you can pull together the people to do it. And I'm not discouraging you. There are certain issues which, if we had a county court set up in every county in America, we could simply adapt. For example, we could take the credit rever decision that was established in Minnesota in the Jerome Daley case, and we could apply it to a case in our own county, and we could get rid of the bogus mortgage system for our entire county. Like that. Okay, and by doing that, we could get rid of a lot of the bogus Federal Reserve practices too. Mm-hmm. Right? So the county courts have a lot of power, and they have a lot of potential to right the wrongs that have been visited on the people in their county. So I'm all for getting our county courts up and established, but I'm also all for training those county courts to know what their limitations are within the greater structure. Right. Another example where the county courts could be used with great efficiency to solve a terrible problem is if the counties that are on our southern border would get their county courts up and organized and address the issue of illegal immigration. Within that county, you have the power to say no to illegal immigration of any kind. And so you could just simply get your county court together and consider the issue of illegal immigration and say no. At which point the state and the federal government would have no choice but to seal that border. So you could, your county courts could pretty much single-handedly hand Joe Biden's policy back to him on a platter. But, these are examples of where the county courts can really play a very great role in defending the health and welfare of the people in the county, defending their property rights, defending their assets against different kinds of seizures. There's a lot that a county court can do.
But there's also some considerations that go with that too, like militia. You've got to have that up and functioning because you have to have enforcement. I always say you and whose army, right? Is going to enforce that when it comes up because you're going to be faced with that. And the other thing is whether in the timing of ex parte Milligan, you've got to make notification that your courts are open and operating and standing in their proper standing. So,
well, Lisa, we're not using our state militias for enforcement of law on the local level. What we use for enforcement of law on the local level are the sheriff and his deputies.
Correct.
But here's the thing. A single county sheriff can deputize the entire male population of a county.
Yes.
So you don't really need a standing army or a militia. What you need are enough people in the county who will stand up and say, no, this is our law and we're going to defend it. And, you guys need to back off because this is our right to determine if we're going to have illegal aliens in our county.
Right. And when I state militia, I am including those sheriffs and their basically their posse in that consideration. So we have to, if you've only got one or two people on a county,
right,
may not be a good idea.
Yeah, if you only have enough people to bring together a jury, you can speak in law, but you may not be able to enforce it by yourselves.
Correct.
Okay. That doesn't mean that it isn't worthwhile speaking in law.
Right.
Right now, we are standing up against the any direct involvement in Russia, in that war in Ukraine. We're saying no. We have an obligation to Russia. We have an alliance and a treaty obligation to Russia that goes all the way back to 1848. And hell no, we are not violating that. They've never violated it with us, and we're not violating it with them. So don't count on us coming to your assistance, U.S. If you get yourselves plastered up against a situation, we're not supporting you.
No, not at all. Okay, well, Anna, I think we maybe lay right here. We'll pick it back up next week with our chart and start working through and talking about the committees of the Assembly and what their jobs are and, what else we need to know about each of the functioning of those committees. Okay?
Right. Well, and certainly we can continue to entertain questions about, uses of courts because our culture has valid uses for courts, and those uses are used to defend our people and their property. And because our courts haven't been standing, our people haven't been properly defended.
Mm-hmm.
So our courts at both the county and the state level can and should be used to defend the rights of our people. This is why the courts are so important.
Right. Okay, everybody. we're gonna dive into it next week and keep working towards those ends. And Leanne, hang on to your questions, and we will get them answered along the way. Okay.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Be happy, be thankful, and tell the ones around you love them. So
Yes, eat an extra piece of pumpkin pie for Jim.
absolutely, little extra heavy whipped cream on it too. So
Yeah,
all right.
absolutely. Take
Bye-bye.
care.